you doing, everybody? I want to welcome you to another episode of the Whatcom Inquisitor. This is Taylor, and with me is actor, comedian, MMA ring announcer, and overall stand-up guy, Kenny Davis. How you doing, Kenny?
I'm doing well. That intro makes me think you could just say guy who doesn't know what he wants to do, Kenny Davis.
Fair enough. It's you know about as much as you want to do as many other folk out there.
I'll take that.
Yeah.
I'll take that.
When you run down the career of, say, Mark Maron or whoever. Like, what does he do? Well, I don't know what he does. He's a podcaster. He's a comedian. He's an actor. He's
See, Maron was a dangerous influence for me when he started to hit with WTF, because it just showed me that, because I think he started doing that when he was 46, 47, 48. So all that did was just give me hope that if I fail for like the next 18 years, it's okay, maybe next year.
Exactly. Have you watched his, I think it's on Hulu, or I don't know where it is actually, but it's the Day in the Life.
Yes, that was on Hulu. Yeah. That was really interesting, actually, to see.
Sort of. It's kind of a poor, sad bastard, but
he was. It was exactly what I hoped he actually would be away from the show. It was comforting to realize there's no acting going on with any of their insecurities or any of it.
Exactly. Well, let's talk about. Speaking of Mark Maron, let's talk about comedy real quick.
Let's do it.
Basically, why don't you run down real quick? How did you get started in comedy from? You're a Western student, right?
Yes, Western grad.
Are you also a Ferndale grad?
No, I grew up in Olympia and then moved up to Western.
I gotcha.
Bellingham.
Some reason you know a lot of the same Ferndale high school crew that. For some reason that I know some folks of, so I thought maybe you were a Ferndale.
I've just wormed my way in.
I gotcha. I didn't graduate, so I don't know. So you started at Western, and what'd you do at Western?
Well, for Western as a student, I was a communication major, and what I came to Western from high school, from Olympia High School, I had been originally an athlete just before then, and then I switched to theater when everybody else got better at baseball, and I just stayed the same. And so, but I always had this knack, like growing up, I'd always loved to visit my grandma in her nursing home, entertain her. The gift was I could always memorize things quickly and then regurgitate it. So I would imitate all sorts of shows, everything. So I segued that to theater, really enjoyed that, and then discovered while I was competent at the dramatic side, I was way better at the comedy side. I'd make people laugh or finding the timing, all of that. So my mom, bless her heart, she signed me up, this was the year 2000, for a stand-up comedy course with Sandy Shore, who was Pauly Shore's sister, up at Giggles Comedy Club in Seattle. And so it was like an 8-week course. At the end of it, you do a performance. I did mine. It was whatever. It was what you would expect for someone 16 years old. So that was a couple years before I got to Western. Didn't really do much with it at that point in Olympia, but when I got to Western, I mean, you know, the whole scene up there, it's kind of whatever you want to make of it, you can make it. So there was an open mic, I remember like freshman year, a lot of music acts, and I think I was the only stand-up comedian, and I did that, loved the reaction, and then just kept pursuing that because I didn't have the courage some of my other friends had, which was to pursue a theater degree,
right?
Which is probably what my love was. If we had been just basing it off of that, totally would have been a theater major.
Yeah.
But I just, part of me, just that insecure, that worrying side, I just felt, I can't do that for quote unquote real world stuff. Mm-hmm. So I did a communication major, which at least allowed me to talk.
Yeah.
And then I just stayed through Dead Parrot Society, through KVIK, a couple shows through there, through stand up, just staying within that theater crowd, just more in the fringes.
Gotcha. So like the rest of us, you settled and got a half-assed degree as opposed to
What is your specialty in communication? Talking.
Yep, pretty much. I did the same thing. Not communications, but so.
What was your degree in? I'm sorry.
Anthropology.
I actually loved my anthropology class, but ran into that again. I couldn't figure out what the application would be. And I'm sure there's tons, but I just scared little Kenny.
There has to be something. I don't know. I've yet to figure it out, so I don't remember any of it. So what was your first experience with You talked a little bit about the scene at Western. I want you to go into that a little more. Your first experience with what you'd call a comedy scene in and around Bellingham.
Well, mine was at least the time I was there, and perhaps I sheltered myself too much because I just kept exclusively to Western. And now when I kind of hear of the scene or up there through other comedians, it seems like there's a lot of open mics either at bars or people creating their own things. In my case, I just was pretty exclusive to Western, and that would mean doing KVIK, which was the I assume it's still there, but the broadcasting program,
a little television show.
Yes. So we did a late night show called Western Live. I started as a writer, worked my way up to host. We did another show. I don't think it ever aired, even though I got school credit for it, called Insert Show Here. Similar premise, just different title. Okay. And then I did Jimmy Sorrentino sought me out. He was starting a stand-up comedy club. This was back in 2004 up there. And so we had a few performances. There was a group of us that did some at the dorms. And I think we did an event for a Jewish celebration. I remember at one of the houses as well. That was fun. And then, of course, Dead Parrot Society was a big deal for me comedy-wise there at Western's campus. And that was probably, I loved all the projects I did, but that was probably the one I have the fondest memories of. But even then, I mean, I think it just speaks to the talent that's there now and has been there the last couple of years. Right. I feel like KVIK, we were the first ones to really start. I don't know if the program was started before us, but to really take advantage of that program. So we reached a certain level of success, but certainly nothing huge by any stretch. I think our biggest publicity was getting Western Live canceled. I still have this sad Kenny newspaper face that was, I'm sure it's on the Western Front still. But then you see, yeah, exactly. But then you see like KVIK now. I know there was a show called You Would, and I know they've really done some great stuff. Same with Dead Parrot Society. I loved the cast I worked with, and to this day I will maintain that if somehow, I know we're in different states and different lives being led, but if a group of us got back together from that era, I'm convinced great things could happen. But in that time frame, there wasn't kind of that access to really realize like, oh, this is the future. Utilize the internet. Utilize some of these other avenues to go into that I've then seen. Like I know a friend of mine, but Allison Lures through Dead Parrot Society. It just seems like it gets more and more and more successful the longer I've been gone. I don't know if that's on me necessarily, but it's certainly a kind of showing where it was at that point doing comedy in Bellingham back in the mid to early 2000s versus where it's at now when you've got like the upfront theater and so many different ways to do it. Yeah,
that's kind of same thing kind of happened to me. Anybody I've ever played music with has gone on to do wonderful things, and I sit on
we love them for it.
I sit back here playing Hey Jealousy by the Gin Blossoms over and over and over again.
But that's a wonderful song. I mean, it's not, you remove the lyrics. That's a happy beat.
Exactly. Or a tiny dancer.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about the upfront. Yes. Well, first, I should ask real quick, why stand-up?
Stand-up, it was one I could always go back to. Having done that class with Sandy Short really opened my eyes to like not only what stand-up was, but I guess the possibilities of it, where sometimes, hopefully this is not as true for me now as it was in the past, but I could definitely get very frustrated in the creative process and had too much of an ego at times. So there would be clashes personality-wise, or it's like thinking this is not what I want to be doing.
For stand-up comedians? That's crazy.
No. This would be for like other projects. Yeah, exactly. There's no bitterness or any sadness of stand-ups. But I could always retreat to stand-up because no matter what happens, good, bad, or otherwise, it's all on me. Okay. Like it's me writing my material, it's me performing it, and there's just that complete, for a control freak, that's amazing. You have that full control and the full accountability. So I just kept going back to it. And I remember I took a break from it for a few years after Western, and it was in 2010, Dan Erickson, a good friend of mine, was a upfront theater cast member, and they were, I believe, starting to do a stand-up comedy night, or had been doing it. And he said, "Hey, you should go do it." And he set it up for me, and I went and did it. Almost didn't do it that night. Like I took a nap beforehand, woke up ready to, and Crenny fans will appreciate this, ready to vomit. But I just pushed through it, did it, and it just reminded me, like it had been 3 years since I'd actively done it, even though I called myself a stand-up the entire time. And it just reminded me the rush of with stand-up, since you're writing the material, if it gets a laugh, there's a big excitement and adrenaline rush that comes from that.
Right.
And I grew so addicted to that specifically. And it's a different kind of rush than if you're an actor delivering a funny line in a play or even in a sketch comedy group. Again, different because there's a lot of cooks in that kitchen. With stand-up, I mean, it's like your final project in any class. Like, it's on you. Yeah,
it's the same thing for musicians. I mean, if you get a big cheer for Ziggy Stardust, it's a big difference getting a big cheer for something you wrote. I mean, so I can totally understand that. How'd you get involved at the Upfront? And you can go ahead and talk about you were in Backflip Wilson with Nathan Cox and Jimmy Sorrento, and I can never say Jimmy's name. I feel like an ass. And I'm not good with names. And Dan Erickson and Chris Erickson.
Yeah.
So yeah, go ahead and run down Backflip Wilson and then how you got started at the Upfront, and
Absolutely. And I'll state, like, post-college in Bellingham, I had said during college, Dead Parrot Society probably be my favorite experience on the comedy scale. Backflip, I have no disrespect to anything else I did or was involved with, by far my favorite post-college Bellingham thing. A great group of guys, and we just kind of, leading up to the Upfront, we had kind of gotten together and spoken. I think Dan, myself, and Jimmy had talked about, we weren't really doing a whole lot at that time. We had dreams, but we were in Bellingham and not really utilizing it. And so we talked about forming this sketch group. We got Chris on board because we loved working with him, Dan and I specifically, in Dead Parrot Society, and got Nathan on board when he moved back. And what was nice was Dan at that point was a cast member at the Upfront Theater. And I believe at that point, or he was about to be. And it kind of was, again, a realm into the world where I wasn't one of the Upfront kids, just as the way, like, I myself wasn't one of the theater kids, but I could play on their playground. So in this way, I was able to use Backflip Wilson and stand-up at the Upfront. And it was such a... and I'll say this to anyone in Bellingham watching or listening to this. I moved to Seattle to do stand-up and other comedy endeavors back in 2011. One of the things I hadn't counted on was just how amazing that Upfront audience is as far as the kindness and warmth they typically show you. Even when they're, like, not laughing at anything you do, super nice and supportive crowd. Seattle is not the Upfront. No. I like Seattle, but it's a totally different world. And I wish I'd appreciated that more while I was there. I've done a couple, I think, stand-up shows and a couple of the panel, one of the shows that Chris Erickson now hosts up there, and every time it's just like this warm coating of love. It's just so nice there, and it's a really cool environment to, I think, practice your comedy, and I think to a degree grow into it. And I make no bones to speak for the Upfront, because those who are more involved, I'm sure, can tell you, like, there have been bad nights you really can grow from it and whatnot. I think coming to Seattle grew me a little bit more because I had a more hostile audience to have to figure out.
Right.
But what a great environment up there to really take advantage of, to kind of get your feet underneath you and get your confidence built. And I'm Backflip Wilson again. I liked, I think, all of our shows. When we performed at Melody Hall in Bellingham, which was a great venue. But the Upfront was the one, again, where you really, really connected, and they've really set up a really cool comedy environment for people to explore their talents in.
Yeah, and I imagine if there is a downside, it's just that, like you said, I think the typical Upfront spectator or audience member is a little more of a comedy fan, maybe slightly more in the know, and so there's a warmer reception for the poor guy who crumples up his notes and throws it on the floor and starts crying.
Well, it's true too, because and I think part of it being an improv theater and coming from that improv background, for the most part, like, you really are rooting for everybody as a performer. You're rooting for everybody to succeed on that stage because the team wins. That extends to the audience there because it is primarily an improv-based theater. There's just that feeling, and I think I've both been that guy and watched that guy who's just on stage, just ready to just melt down and lose it. And when I was that guy, I never felt that audience turn on me to a level that made me never want to do comedy again. It's always like, oh, you got this. We're not going to laugh and do better next time, but we're not going to hold it against you.
Exactly. Seattle, though, different story.
Way different story. There's a perverse fun to it, because to this point, I've actually given up stand-up at this point. Right now, probably for good. And part of that was it's just not the art form. Like, when I got down to Seattle, I realized to really, you see these comics down here and so many of them are so good. And I'll go beyond that. So many of them are great. And a lot of the part of that is they just do it so much. There's so many open mics and so many opportunities. Realistically, you could do it 7 nights a week. It turns out I don't love it 7 nights a week. I liked my once a month up in Bellingham.
Exactly.
And the touring and all that, I just recognized that's for me, that's not my strength. And that was, again, I got very, and I'll always just be so thankful to Bellingham. I got very used to, it wasn't a grind doing it up there. It stayed fun the whole time. And Seattle was different. I've made great friends, great connections, that part awesome. But when you realize the realities of, hey, I'd like to make a living for this, that wasn't quite ready for it.
I always think of Kevin Nealon.
Yeah.
Who, great comedic actor, great writer. But he had an HBO special a while back. I don't know when it was, maybe like 10 years ago.
Okay.
Recently, an HBO special. So, already done 20 years, what he's paid his dues already.
Yeah.
Does this HBO special. It's horrible. Like, it was just the great, like, it's Kevin Nealon, come on. It was terrible. And he's like looking at the audience like, come on, it's funny, right? And so I keep thinking about that. There's some people are just, to be a comedian, you really have to be, and I mean this in a good way, a selfish bastard. and
yes.
you have to really enjoy that side of it. And I think,
you really,
I think there's plenty of people too that are just wickedly funny that are not going to be funny that way.
Well, and I wonder if you, on the musician side, if this would be similar. One of the things I also realized that I typically, and hopefully just until recently, have been really terrible at is really not only networking, but really pushing the marketing angle. Yeah. Because I've learned like so many of the comics will make their money on like the merchandise they sell, or really push to like get those shows and make those connections. And you're really, it's a hustle to really to succeed. And I don't mean like really succeed like you see them on television. I mean succeed to make more than $5 a night. I mean, it's an absolute sales marketing hustle, and that's awesome for the people who have that personality. I totally don't. And I didn't recognize that. I'd always kind of fancied myself as like, I can be and I think this came through in my stage persona at times, this cynical, sarcastic guy. And that's, for the most part, I'll make my comments, at home or watching shows or whatever, but for the most part, that's not who I am in real life. And I realize the people who are like that are just, it was very tough for my ego to admit it, but they're better than I am. And no matter how hard I practiced, it's okay that they're going to remain better than I am.
Yeah, there's got to be a little bit of, in every comedian, there's got to be a little bit of Stephen Wright, Carrot Top, and 50 Cent, I think. You have to be able to put on all those hats when you're dying one way or another. But
I hope that's a prop joke about Carrot Top. Just he's got all of those. He's got his 50 Cent hat with a bullet hole.
But it's just, it's the same way for music. You get to a point where you realize you got to be a way bigger jerk than sometimes you're prepared to be. Not a jerk, and I don't mean that to knock anyone. I'm just saying you have to. It is a hustle, and it is a. It's there's a lot of marketing, even in a small town, even a small city like Bellingham. There's a lot of marketing involved.
Yes.
And especially, if you're trying things out in somewhere bigger like Seattle or something like that, it's real easy to go from being to have a system or have something that works for you in a place like Bellingham, and then go to Seattle and realize that there's people that for some reason, if they're, trust fund kids or whatever, I don't know, but there's people that have these systems in place, that they can market the daylights out of themselves and just kill the competition somehow.
And I agree, and I like the way you put that. Like, it's not jerk in the sense of being mean to people, but I think there's a very strong difference. I believe that I'm a funny person. I believe at stand up I can be at least mediocre. I like to think I can be better, but let's put my base at mediocre to poor. Okay. There are a lot of people who can do that. The ones who are doing better, like if you kind of put in that same wavelength of comedy, if you can also add that sales side, that the idea for how to push yourself further, and not just on stage but off stage as well. It just makes all the difference in the world. And I kind of, in Bellingham, I know I got there at a college age, but I grew up through that comedy system. Just, if you're funny, you're fine. And it was kind of a splash of cold water in my face, and that's my own ignorance throughout Bellingham. I'm sure there were people the entire time I was there doing better and really taking on that aspect of it. But I mean, even Backflip Wilson, I love that group. But one of the things, if I had it to do over with that group, and I'd be curious to see what the other guys would say as well, but one of the ways that we failed and let ourselves down was that we really didn't take that initiative to really promote ourselves, to really get out there. We would have like one hand-drawn poster. We would do some word of mouth on Facebook, but we did like 9 shows, I think, total. And that was a group with that collection of talent that could have been much better if we had really pushed ourselves beyond, hey, what's funny? That's good enough.
Yeah.
And that's not bad. I think we put on a good product for the most part, but we certainly didn't make it a product that was I guess brand awareness, for a total marketing buzzword.
And there's a lot of competition on Twitter and Facebook nowadays too. So it's, even if you have a stellar thing going on, you've got to compete with, Billy's beating up Tommy at the playground tonight. Well, come on down. There's kind of it's amazing the stuff that's, we get a 1,000 tweets in an hour versus the stuff that's like, hey, come to the upfront tonight, and like 2 people go, okay.
Yeah, and I don't remember. I watched Nathan Cox's episode a couple weeks ago, and I'm kind of blanking on this aspect of it. But I mean, a great example is with him through that Backflip Wilson page. He did Bellingham State of Mind, which crazy blew up, and then he followed up with Oprah's Air, which I to this day maintain is hilarious. And I had fully expected that because it was a national story to go so much bigger. Yeah. And I think it has like 1/180th of the views that Bellingham State of Mind, and it's not for anything of, it doesn't look bad, it doesn't sound bad, the lyrics are funny, it's well performed. It's just a matter of hitting that right thing at the right time. Yep. And certainly my videos, I think the most I have on anything is Shower Guy, which I did through Trailer Wars, which
you had to commit to.
I really.
You earned it.
We just hide that from employers. Yeah. No, but I mean, that's another one where I think I have like 1,000 views or something. Yeah. And that's like a celebration in my world. But the context being, man, I could really, with just more commitment, push those numbers higher, because people are totally accomplishing that in comedy from like any city, any town.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And there definitely seems to be a place for, Well, I wanted to talk about podcasting and how the comedy plays, how kind of a comedy writer's mind plays into that. But first, I want a quick rundown. 5 of your favorite comedians.
Okay. Dennis Miller. Pre-2001. He was just my absolute...
Pre-Bill O'Reilly tool.
Pre-Bill O'Reilly. The HBO Miller run was actually probably what influenced me to really get into stand-up. I was such a fan. So I got to put him number 1, despite what, differences I have with him nowadays. And then I would also say Kids in the Hall, just a collective as a group, huge influence. Will Forte, Craig Kilborn, just that guy. I love what he does. And then I'll actually also go Albert Brooks is a big one. I've kind of recently, I always loved him from Mother forward, but I've recently gotten to his earlier stuff like Real Life and just as a comedian, and it just blows my mind. Like,
he was an excellent stand-up comedian.
Unbelievable. Yeah. And I feel like he's often, I think some of the older comics, when you talk like that, when you hear the famous ones talk about, he'll get mentioned. But I think kind of my generation and certainly younger ones, he's the one who gets overlooked when you talk about like your Pryors, your Carlins. But he would be my guy. I thought he was just insanely creative.
He brought kind of a different take of the whole, it was interesting because the time he showed up as far as stand-up, so I mean late 70s, early 80s, I don't even know when, about then somewhere, but he was kind of... He was kind of doing, I guess, Jewish humor. I don't know what you'd say, but it was a little bit different take than the classic Henry Mason, kind of, or Harry Mason, Henry Mason, Harry Mason,
Jackie Mason. Jackie Mason. Sorry.
Whatever. I don't know who the hell I'm talking about.
Mason.
I researched this stuff 5 minutes before I started the damn interview. People, come on now. I just looked up 4 comedians. I was like, all right, mention these comedians. It was Milton Berle, Jackie Mason. Those are comedians, right? No, I'm kidding.
They're right. Come on.
But yeah, it was kind of a different. He did a more kind of updated Jewish humor to the classic like 50s and 60s, like, you know, "Take My Wife Please" jokes, and it really worked for him. He kind of did "Take My Wife Please" in a long form. Which,
That's what it was. It was almost, to me, his stand-up was a sketch in stand-up form. And I feel like recently Will Forte, for me, he's not a stand-up, but kind of refined that for this generation of just someone it's got a nugget of just normalcy to it, but then it goes to such a heightened, weird level. And then Kids in the Hall being the bridge in my world. These 3 are all connected, that I just have always really bonded at. And anyone who's either watched any sketches I've written or even just read the scripts, you'll see that whether intentional or unintentional, typically I'm just aspiring to rip them off flat out. Like, would Kids in the Hall do this? Would Albert Brooks have done that? And I love that style of humor. Raccoons.
All right, so comedy plays well into podcasting. It's one of those things. You talked about the grind. And definitely podcasting is something where you can maybe slow the grind down, but you still have, you know, we live in a wonderful era of, you know, it has its problems, but YouTube is a pretty amazing thing when you think that there's actually TV that you can turn on that's completely user created. There's more content than normal TV, and it's all amateur, it's all user created, and some of it's pretty damn good.
Oh yeah.
And it's, you know, I've kind of love that. And the same thing with just kind of audio stuff that's out there. It's amazing now that you can kind of turn on radio or turn on this or turn on that. That's user created and amateur, and you can get it from anywhere in the world. And it's just amazing to me. And I think I've never held to the idea that there's the possibility of too much art. I just don't believe it. But I've always thought that, you know, everyone on earth should get their own podcast, because there's going to be so many more maybe that are horrible, and I just don't care. I want the couple that are nuggets in there that are going to be amazing. So yeah, but you know, it definitely there's maybe less of that stand-up grind, or definitely less of that grind where you can really kind of hone it to a weekly thing or something like that.
Yes.
And you did that with Crenny. Were there any shows before Crenny? Did you do anything before Crenny, podcasting wise?
No, and what's interesting
kind of did the Western thing, and
I'd always been either live audience or televised with my material, and I'd never done just audio, which is crazy to me to think back on. I one of my bigger regrets that I didn't do at Western was Cugs, the radio station, because I love the broadcast art form, be it radio or now this one with podcasting. It's probably my favorite.
Yeah.
And so by the time Crenny rolled around with myself and Chris Patton, it just was a dream to finally be exploring that. And to this, again, I'm trying to explore with a new one. I'll get into that in a little bit, but it's one where I kind of wish I'd been doing it a lot earlier so that I could go to these like radio stations or whatever, of like, here's my content. And I just, for the most part, don't have that yet.
Yeah. So how did Crenny get started? Patton was on the show, talked about it a little bit,
yes.
But
well, he talked about his, and thank goodness for his memory, because I'd actually forgotten this part of it. But we used to work together. That's how we originally met, was through the workplace, and we would have lunch together every day and just, you know, riff on topics. And he, as you saw in his episode, and he was watched his work, I think he's just one of the funniest people ever.
That's hilarious.
And it's not that he's funny in like acting at things. I think him being himself and getting riled up is one of my favorite, like, as far as comedy devices that I know up front. Top 3 for me is Chris getting mad.
Chris is it's funny because Chris, I think he might not say this of himself. I know he wouldn't say this of himself, but Chris is like a naturally awesome dude that kind of makes you feel small in his presence, even though you don't, you know, you never want to. Like he wouldn't like that, I don't think. But sorry, Chris, you wouldn't like that. But maybe you would actually. Maybe you're an asshole. Maybe that's what this is about. We'll get together and talk about this again. No,
I think you just did a Patton impression right there.
Well, you know. I listened to a lot of Cranny.
I actually, that assessment's actually dead on. One of the things, like, as far as doing that show, and I'll come back to that. So we started the show. The idea was that let's take these conversations we have in the car and just put it in show format. He wanted to do a podcast. I wanted to do a podcast. Let's do one together. So we taped a pilot in January of 2010, sat on it for 6 months. And then I think May or June that year, we started actually doing the show. And it was interesting because it was, he alluded to this and was totally right. A podcast, and I'm sure you're learning this as well, so much harder than it looks.
Well, yeah. And at the time too, when you guys started doing that, there wasn't 8 million ways to start a podcast. There was like 3, and he knew how to get it done.
And yeah, full credit to him. As far as that show goes, any listeners get to hear it. Entire credit goes to Chris. He did all of the technical work, from taping it to editing it to chopping it up. All of that he took care of. And God bless him for it. He was really good at that. And it was kind of learning on the fly. But one of the things we kept learning was it does have its own grind, where you would think, like, okay, once a week, I'm not in front of a live audience, I'm controlling the content, or even with a co-host, we're controlling it. But like radio, and you'll hear hosts allude to this all the time, that you have to create content, you have to come up with stories ahead of time that you're going to talk about, because you can riff for an hour. But I would argue, while I think some of them were entertaining, some of the episodes where we did more of that than planning out were probably far weaker on entertainment value compared to what at least I was thinking. And I will specifically call myself out for all the Wings references. Those were typically on the fly, no pun intended, but versus when we would plan out real or fake, or we're going to talk about this topic. I thought those were much stronger episodes, and we just got better at the format as we went on.
Right. But it definitely created I will defend the real banter back and forth, because it definitely showed 2 different personalities.
Yes.
One that was saying, Frasier's the greatest show ever, which is a good choice, but Frasier's the greatest show ever. And then the other one saying, no, they should all die. that made for the most beautiful podcast banter. I love the whole attitude of the whole show. But one of the things, I want to talk to the audience here real quick. One of the things when he talks about a podcast being harder to put on, if you have never done it or done anything like this, the deal is that you record, say, an hour of making sandwiches, and which Kenny can tell you about, and the problem is you've recorded that hour, right? Well, then someone's got to go and essentially edit, has to listen to that hour again after they just did it, has to listen to the thing again that they just did, so they really don't care because they just did it, so they have to listen to it again. And then maybe listen to it again to make sure they edited it right, got a mess up, or didn't mess anything up. Then it has to render for God knows how long. Let's say twice the amount of the damn show. Yeah. Then it goes on to wherever it lives on the internet, and amazingly, because we're all just sadists and selfish, self-centered people, we all go on and listen to the episode ourselves for some reason. I don't know why we do this. Maybe we don't. See, I know Chris doesn't do. See, that's the thing, is now I'm going to be like, Chris doesn't do that. He doesn't go listen to the show. He just puts it on, is like, all right, it's done.
I'm pretty sure he listens to the show. That's the beauty of Chris.
Oh, I know he does. But yeah, you put it on and then you probably listen to it again. So that as many people out there that are like, haha, making sandwiches, you gotta remember that the bizarre people that made this podcast have listened to the same show like 5 times. And didn't really want to do that.
That was one of my struggles. During the airing of the show, I actually rarely listened to the actual finished product. Because I found early on, like, I would listen to certain segments that I wanted to hear again. But early on, I've gotten to a point where I can watch myself on anything played back video wise.
Right. Just
the audio, I grew so self-critical that I felt it was like hurting my performances going on, because I would get so into my head, because I just, for the most part, I hated everything I was doing when I heard it back in episode. And I went, well, this is destructive towards putting out an entertaining product.
Okay.
And so towards the end, I started to listen more, because I got over that to a degree to say, well, the only way you're going to get better, kind of like an athlete, is to watch what you've been doing and improve that. Mm-hmm. But for the longest time, I had such respect for Chris, because I know, well, I'll say he told me. So I know to the extent he was telling me the truth, that he not only in editing, but later on listened to the full episodes. And that was great of him to do, because I think he's got a very good sense of who he is. I think the more, I guess, underreported parts of where I think Krenny worked at its best. Mm-hmm. Whereas as a human being, I think it came out beautifully and ugly at the same time on that show, that I'm full of insecurities. Yeah. And for the most part, unless he's doing a damn good job of hiding it, Chris isn't. Right. And that's something I've always saluted him for.
I think he's full of different insecurities.
Okay, that's yes, that's fair. I think
he's worried about, clowns coming out from underneath his bed and eating his feet or something.
I don't think he has the performer insecurities or anxieties, which was, I think, a really good mix, because if both of us threw that his way, okay, then the show would have been just flat out awesome. Yeah. But if we were both my way, it would have been a terrible show. At least with the balance, you kind of had a mixture of good and bad.
Well, yeah, no, it worked better the way it was, because you definitely had I'll put you in as everyman.
Sure.
Well, not every man. I think Chris is every man too. But it's two different types of people. You kind of had a left and right, a yin and yang,
sure,
zig and zag, a Truman and Capote. You had a kind of not scared. I would never call you scared, but insecure, more kind of that kind of humor. And then you had kind of the psychotic Zen master that sometimes Chris was.
Well, what's interesting,
and it worked, because there was always something that anything that you would build up into this thing, then he would knock it down.
Well, what's interesting about that, you guys, I loved your interview with him, and part of the reason I was always excited to do this interview, because I think you've got a really great show going here. But part of that was you guys mentioned, let's hear from Kenny the honest feedback from Krenny, and so I was really excited to talk about that, because publicly, and even personally, I don't think I've really talked about it to any degree. So as interesting as anybody could potentially find this, I thought, well, let's do it on the show. And I actually think I would use the word scared. There's a couple things that if I had it to do over or would want to grow on for next time in a show, I never minded him editing me. I know he had done it. I actually thought he has such a keen eye for it. I never felt like he was stifling me in any way. That part's true. I know you guys were joking, like he's gonna throw Chris under the bus. No, I actually thought he was really good. The part that I wish I could do over was, I think there is just a personality side, a part of me that, not scared in the sense of I felt he was actually gonna beat me or anything, but a part of me that with his personality, it is, you put it perfectly, is very forceful, and I'm right. And I love that about him as a friend. As a performer, I think I definitely bowed to him a lot, because I don't have that. I'm very much in the please love me, please like me vein. And so I think I would go subservient to him so much that whether it was for comedic device or just really kind of lowering my voice or opinion, there was too much of an element of fear, I think, on my end, where I think there should have been more like rising up of like, yeah, throw it back in his face. And not that he was ever rude to me, but just as far as the personalities kind of meeting in the middle. Right. Where I wish I'm at a better insecurity point, kind of at this point, but I wish I had been at that stage of life, because I think it would have made a better product on that show.
Right.
I thought he did a fantastic job of kind of directing that show back to entertaining parts and limiting. I think I would go. Part of this was when I named Kilborn as an influence. Kilborn, a lot of the times, what I loved about him was he would do the jokes for himself, I got the sense. And so Wings, after a while, became I was entertaining myself. Meanwhile, forgetting, despite the please love me, please like me, oh yeah, people need to like what I'm talking about too. And I thought Chris did a really good job kind of trying to redirect us from that. So it was a really, really, really fun show. And I feel bad too. The other part that I would say on that is I think I have inconsistent humor tones at time, and part of that is, and anyone I don't think I've ever said this out loud, but hopefully it'll make a lot of sense to people. A lot of the time I've struggled like within my faith, because I'm Christian, and in personal life I don't know that I always do it public life. So he would do sometimes these amazing segments, and I actually don't remember if this one aired. Hopefully you or somebody else can remind me. We had done a thing where he was going to talk about political mail he had gotten. I think this was during the 2010 election season, and he was just ripping into it. And then there was a particular congressman that he was just going nuts on. A lot of swearing, and it was hilarious.
I think I remember that. I think that did air.
Oh, good. I got super nervous after the episode because I was thinking, well, okay, this is a pretty graphic content, at least to my ears. And two, like, what if this is a local guy? What if he hears this? There could be, and this is so stupid now, and I can laugh at it, but like slander, like for the things that we're saying. And I just, I definitely got gun shy and sensory because of that insecurity of how do I balance personal life versus what I want to put out there. And his confidence was so much better to just, this is funny, this is entertaining, let's do it. And I would say, it was funny, he said last week that he felt like he edited me. I felt through my own issues that I was editing him, like trying to calm him down.
You were editing both yourself and him, and and at the same time, this is where the inconsistency comes in. I would also cross those lines from depending on how I was feeling on a given episode, and I would also try and like push him that direction. So that I think from my end of the co-hosting, it was a very inconsistent show because you didn't necessarily know where I would be coming from on week to week. And anybody who listens through, I'm fairly certain you'll pick up on that. Hopefully it's still entertaining, but that's one where I will give him all the credit in the world. And I think this is where it's fun to watch him perform, as he does not come from that performer's mindset, that it's just pure confidence and self-belief and I'm in charge and dominant the whole way. And that's very, very attractive to watch and to listen to from an entertainment perspective. That got deep. I'm sorry. but could be tough to work with, depending on if you are not as.
And that's what it is. It's not that he's not collaborative. He is one of the most collaborative people I've ever met. It's if your own personality.
It's just easy. It's easy to let him run the show, just because.
Absolutely.
He says he knows what he's doing, so, and hey, maybe today I don't know what I'm doing, so go ahead.
And he says it with such authority, and that's, again, I don't know if he'll hate me for saying this. He's such a nice guy. Like, when you get away from that persona, like I said, he's someone who really, again, kind of that improv aspect, wants you to succeed as well. So it's nothing he's doing. It's your own mindset of when you kind of are interacting with that, that you have to rise up within yourself to kind of match that confidence. So great show. I really enjoyed it, and it was a bummer that it quit. It was the right time because I moved to Bothell. We kept doing it because I didn't want to. He was right. I didn't want to be responsible for that show ending. And part of it was I really enjoyed the show.
Yeah.
And it's an hour and 15 minutes to drive up to Bellingham every week. So for a while, it really was no problem. After a while, a little bit of a grind, and then it was a little bit tougher to find some some of those topics. And again, if you're going to do a partnership, and this is where Casting the News that I do with him and Dan Erickson nowadays on YouTube, all it is just kind of messing around casting movies. There's not really that intimacy needed for that show to interact on a personal, honest level. With Krenny, there were a lot of honest, personal moments, and if you're not in the same town, you're not talking on the phone like every day or weekly, I think it kind of grew tough to keep that honesty with the show. Which led to a funny episode, I thought, The Wizards of Waverly, but also a kind of a middle finger of, okay, this is a totally different show at this point. So I think it ended at the right point, and I really enjoyed it. I think we've done 2 almost reunion episodes, and those are fun because it's more of just a catch up, quarterly, annual, whatever. But I would say, like, if you're going to do a podcast with somebody and it's supposed to be, part of it is your honest relationship, either make sure you're keeping that part of it of like just talking weekly or kind of away from the show, or you basically, kind of acknowledge that it's a different show. So it was a lot of fun.
You guys did the Krenny sleepover at my house. That was awesome.
Oh my gosh, that was so amazing.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that was good times.
Oh, that was so much fun.
We had for those that didn't know, they had that Crenny posted had a long running, like a 3-episode running a contest, I guess. I don't even know what the criteria were now. I think it was just like write us a letter and have it. Tell us why we should come sleep at your house.
Yes, and it was you and listener Charlotte.
And I basically sent a bunch of food.
What's that?
I think I just said you'll get a bunch of food and video games.
And we were in.
Like that. It was like we're there. And you got food and video games, so it totally played.
That's seriously, as far as just nights in Bellingham, definitely be on a top 10 list for me. I had so much fun that night. So thank you. You were a great host, you and your wife. Amazing hosts. And yeah, that was the energy and banter in that room during the actual episode was kind of where I would aspire to go with every episode. It was just so much fun and free flowing, and just let it happen.
Yeah, that was a good night.
It was very good.
During that evening, there was some WWE video game beatdowns, and I actually haven't for a while now. I haven't been into the WWE because I've been just busy. I haven't noticed anything.
Sure.
I don't even know what's going on. But we do share a small love of the WWE, as just telling people now, because don't want people to think I'm crazy or anything, as theater, as I call it colorful stunt theater.
I like that.
And I appreciate my stunt theater, that is the WWE. And one of the things I've always liked about it is and it's kind of weird. People are going to really hate me. I'm going to make this connection. I'm going to connect the WWE and Trailer Wars right now.
Yes.
And this is going to be bad. But what makes WWE, which I still want to call WWF to this day, and I have to stop myself every time I say it. But what makes WWE awesome is that the acting is bad, and they know it's bad, and they act down to the level that they need to be to make it bad enough to be good. If that makes any sense. And I think there's some great Trailer Wars actors that do the same thing that'll hate me right now, but that you kind of have, there's a B level that makes things there's when you tell somebody that I got Tiffany pregnant and now she's gonna her boyfriend Kane or whatever is going to come kick my ass, whatever, that could get real soap opera. Well, not soap opera. If you put that on a Chris Nolan level, that would get really weird really quick. I mean, that would just bring you down, man. But put it at a soap opera B level, and that's pure entertainment. You could watch that every week for the rest of your life.
And I will.
And somehow, I don't know why that works, but let's talk about acting. That was a terrible segue, but I'm going to run with it. With acting, when did you so obviously you did theater at Western, got into acting, maybe got out of it a little bit as you did stand up, and then with Backflip, lots of shorts, things like that, so you kind of were back into it. Around when did you start doing other stuff? I know you had mentioned on one Crenny episode you did like a live theater thing, like a and talk about some of that. When did you kind of get back into acting after kind of the comedy thing?
Yeah, so originally actually acting for me was in high school, and I had done a couple shows, even, I don't know how, but got the lead in one, and that was a lot of fun, especially on the memorization side. But then, you're right, went to comedy, and coming out of comedy, out of Western, so all in one year. 2010 was just a lot of stuff happened. That was the year I actually met who became my wife, Jess, in Bellingham. Had stopped at the time. I was also the Bellingham Bells PA announcer. I was the ring announcer for Fight Night Entertainment. That stuff came to an end. Backflip Wilson was coming to an end. It was a big year of just upheaval and just what's next. And I left the job where Chris and I had met. I left that job that year and was kind of in between jobs for a bit. It was just a lot of oh my gosh, what to do, what's next. And that was about August, September of that year. And so for me, I prayed about it, looked online, and kind of saw, was trying at that time to figure out, like, what do I want to get paid for someday? If I had my dream, And a lot of it went at that time went to acting. And so I remember it was one specific day, and what a yo-yo, like the yin and the yang of acting. There was I was meeting with a potential agent for representation, and then I was also auditioning for a show. I was way more excited about the agent, and the show was what it was. I go to the agent, and I won't use any names here. I think I did on the Krenny episode. I'll leave it to that. But basically, it got revealed quickly by a Google search later that night. Total scam artist and ripoff. And I left feeling just the lowest of the low, just devastated. But then I went and had a really good audition for Awesome 80s Prom, which was at Comcast Arena. And they were so nice. These were New York actors, which I hadn't really expected the kindness that they showed. And I got cast in that. And it was kind of like a Tony and Tina's wedding, where you as the actor, half of you's acting on stage. It takes place at a high school prom, and half of you's interacting because it's at a high school prom with the audience members / classmates. And I just had such a good time with that. And later on did another show with them, I think at the Tulalip Casino a year later, and really enjoyed acting. But just I don't think the love was there the way I think a lot of my Western theater friends will do anything to get into shows or to really pursue and dedicate themselves to that craft. And I just, for me, that was just a very light, I had a really good time acting, but it wasn't necessarily something in the way like sketch or announcing. I've kind of recognized like I will do anything to get better and to find practice and all of that. So I didn't really pursue it anymore at that point, because it just let the people who really want to be great at it do it, and I'll go find my own canvas to try and be great at.
Yeah,
a lot of fun though, really nice people.
And you've had some great Trailer Wars bits as an actor.
That's very kind.
I kind of you've definitely been. I was gonna say is now you've had things. You've been in the shower naked.
Yes.
You've had fake vomit poured all over you.
Yes.
Has there been any blood? There's been fake blood on you, I'm sure.
I believe there has.
Okay. You've any number of things has happened to you. You've. I kind of feel like I should put together a reel, maybe even play it on the show, of various ways you've either died or been mutilated via Trailer Wars, and I don't know if that's an honor, but it's awesome.
I will take that as an honor, actually.
But I really enjoy. I actually really enjoyed your last trailer, which is the Charming Host. I really enjoyed.
Oh, thank you.
And
it's funny. I love Trailer Wars. So to Chris, to Sean Meyer, to all the people who've been involved, not only creating it but keeping it going, all the credit. I really wish when I was in college that this had existed just at an earlier time in my life. It's such it's so fun. And I one of the things this is a very, again, for anyone who's listening to Krenny or just even this interview, this is a very me statement I'm about to make. But where Charming Host came from was that I think the last trailer I'd done before that was almost a year ago, and I had done Grumpy Old Couchman, and it was one of the worst things I've ever done at Trailer Wars.
That was a tough Trailer Wars though, because that was old people.
It was, but I had
as the theme, so people can use their imaginations. You get the theme, old people, and immediately you start thinking, wow, that's gonna not be awesome.
Well, but it was a bad. The reason it was so bad, such a bad moment for me, was I wasn't there live in attendance that night. But I had been convinced that the piece I had submitted, because there was a running gag in previous Trailer Wars about couches being the lead, and it hadn't been done in like 10 or 12 trailers or Trailer War editions. So I brought it back for the old people theme, and I was convinced it was not only hilarious but going to bring down the house, and I was a strong contender to win. And I'll sell him out here. I get a text later that night. I ask Nathan Cox, who was in attendance. I'm like, how did it go? And I love him because Nathan will not lie to me. And he basically, in so many words, said, you can do better. Do you want help next time? I was like, are you okay? Like, do you need someone? And it just was so shattering.
That trailer was your vague book.
It was because people saw the trailer and then imagined you alcoholic on a couch
alone.
Things are not going well.
Things are going well for Kenny when he left. Man, we gotta.
I don't. To my knowledge, I've rarely been that wrong on when I thought like sometimes I've known like a piece or a sketch or even a stand-up bit will not be good, and I'm just going to try and sell it. On that one, I thought I had very little selling to do. So to be that wrong, so I didn't do it for a few rounds. And on this one, I really wanted to get back involved, like for a long stretch, not just here I'm in one and then I'm gone. But I also wanted to be much better and with effort. So I sought out, obviously Ryan Covington's in that trailer, who I just think, for my money, he doesn't often get mentioned, I think, in like kind of the comedic conversation of comedians of Bellingham.
It's hilarious.
I think he's absolutely a top 3 pick.
I've only seen him in Trailer Wars and in the two in a couple of the shorts that Patton's done, but I haven't seen him anything aside from that. But I know in those he's hilarious.
I don't think he does like stand up or sketch comedy, but just as a performer, I think he's someone, along with, and I actually maybe controversial, Tyler Swank is another one who just like slays me. I almost can't perform with him because I'll just start laughing. But for charming host, it was Ryan Covington, Chris Erickson, Chris Patton directing. I was like, all right, I'm gonna get the people that I kind of the all-star list that I can gather for this, and just put on something that was much better than the last time I was seen,
and a little simpler.
Yes, and I've learned watching other trailers, because I think you're right. Some of them can have very B movie quality acting, writing, all of that, and that's
which they should.
Exactly, but there have been some really cool products that have been presented too, and I wanted to get more into that category, at least one. And I will, I will go a step further and kind of your pro wrestling analogy. Yeah. Part of, to me, the charm of Trailer Wars, of what works so well is, and it can be really encapsulated in the night that they did Westerns. And I remember my trailer went up first. It was a remake of the War Wagon. And by the time the ending of it hit, with the music building, you had Ryan Covington, Dan Erickson in it, the crowd started to cheer. Like, they were really invested in this. And then later on that night came Chris Patton's the Gold Crush. Yes. Which was a huge ovation. Again, kind of like an athletic, a sporting, scripted, and the acting's not always great, but you as a viewer get very invested in these. Yeah. And like an athletic competition, you're cheering for the one you want to win. Yep. Or what's that? And I think to me, that's part of the charm of pro wrestling. It takes everything I love about sports and adds that scripted, okay, you really are trying to get this reaction out of me. And I love that.
I kind of feel bad that I've had 3 people on the show talking about Trailer Wars, but it is something I'm into locally, and I think it's kind of one of the great things in Bellingham right now.
I don't think you should feel bad at all. I think it's a really, really cool, and it's 3 different perspectives, and I also agree it's something that what a unique idea. I mean, the fact that on YouTube you could type in youtube.com/Trailer Wars, which is, as a concept, I had thought would have been done before they did it. And it goes to the Bellingham Trailer Wars. They were the first to really pioneer like this concept to that level with that title. Yeah. And I think it's just something hugely to be proud of Bellingham, and one of the highlights of the town.
And one of the things I've really enjoyed about it, being colorful stunt theater, it's one of the great things is that it doesn't, the Trailer Warriors can't compete sometimes on. It never started with people being able to compete on a level of we have full digital red, we have the red camera.
Yes.
We've got, we don't have any of that, and it had to be, and they don't have the time. They don't have, you don't have the actors. You may not even have an actor. You don't have any way to do it, and so you're trying to put together something just because it's fun and just because there's a place where people will show it, no matter what it is. It'll get shown on the Trailer Wars screen, and people will go, wow, that had nothing to do with the theme, but okay. And that's kind of what makes it so awesome, is what tends to, over the year, a couple years, it's what tends to do well and what tends to win and what tends to be loved over time are the things that have a certain soul to them and a certain personality to them that's completely outside of the, I guess you could say, the quality or the polish of it, and that's something I really, really cherish. I think that's an excellent thing. I kind of always feel a little bit like a a jerk to some people when I say I hate nice trailers at Trailer Wars. But I don't hate them, but like if I see one that's really kind of spotless and polished and really well put together, as far as like someone's trying to make something legit, or if it maybe looks like a company or something that is making one or whatever, I don't hate it. I just don't. It doesn't appeal to me the same way that that a Timber Boss does, or that a a typical patent trailer or whatever. It doesn't have the same appeal to me. It doesn't have the soul.
That's actually a really well stated explanation of it. And the other part I really like is that with almost any artistic endeavor, be it, I'll just keep it to Bellingham, music in Bellingham, or improv in Bellingham, or stand-up, or theater, there is an element, whether you try and defeat it or not, of groupthink that happens, where you kind of know with the comedians, even though there'll be different styles, there's a certain uniformity to it. Same with the musicians, different genres, but again, uniformity, this is what a musician is. With Trailer Wars, I mean, not only just in this, how high quality the film of it is, or the cameras that are being used, but just the ideas that are coming forth. It as a format does not allow for that groupthink, because you're getting such wildly divergent views, and each round, it's not like every Trailer Wars has these 8 studios competing or what have you. It's a consistently rotating
there starts to be a fear as you've gotten between 6 to 10 trailers somewhere, there starts to be a fear of not knowing who's going to compete in it. Of am I going to do something that somebody else is doing? Am I going to do the exact same trailer essentially that someone else is doing? So everyone tries to step up and make theirs that little bit more eclectic.
That much more to themselves. That's the one thing I guess a couple things, but the biggest thing I took away from the stand-up comedy course I did, all those, oh my gosh, it's 13 years, all those years ago, was that nobody can, be you. That's your unique quality. No matter what you're talking about, it's that it's coming through your lens. And that just really stuck with me and made an impact, that the more you can attain that honesty, the better the product's going to be, because not only are they relating to you, but no one else can copy you. So if everyone's doing Westerns, that's fine. But if it's coming through your personal lens, you'll find a way to make it your own. And I think that part is really, I think that's a very unique feature of Trailer Wars, and something, besides all the funniness of, there are a lot of funny trailers and a lot, we can laugh at like some of the crap quality, intentional or not. But that is something that's really cool. It really lends itself to a very, I really don't know if this is a pretentious or even the right word, but almost a renegade film spirit.
It's punk rock. It's punk rock.
It absolutely is.
It's grunge. It's all that was best of the period between 1989 and 1996. Back to life in a weird little, kind of form for those of us that are old enough to remember it.
And look at me. This is the only time I'll ever be around grunge or alternative. Like, I need this. It's not a want. I need this in my life. It's
kind of funny because that's very much I don't know. I was going to say the problem I have. It's not a problem, but I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't get out. Married with kid. I have a pretty vanilla life, but with Trailer Wars, it's the same thing with Krenny. When I listened to Krenny, the first thing I wanted to hear was just how insane it would get on an episode. It was so oh, here we go. All right, that kind of thing. And then it's the same thing with Trailer Wars. When a trailer opens up, creature features was actually really amazing.
Yes.
And I know, excuse me, I know you weren't there in the theater, but it was really great in the theater because there was, after the first trailer, I can't remember what it was, but it was just out there. It was just violent enough, or not violent, but gross enough that it really was awesome. It set this great tone of uh-oh, where are we going right now? What's going to happen? Because nobody's filtered these things, so who knows?
Of the work that I've submitted to there, I think my favorite reaction, and I might just go this for almost any performance I was ever a part of in Bellingham, was being in the audience tonight. I don't remember if you remember when I had Dan as Diaperosopus with the two-headed cat, and it was after I had won for Shower Guy, so I couldn't win for the next round per the rules. And I put out just the weirdest thing I could think of, and I also did started playing with the titles in there. So like when it's like from here, it was started basically a conversation with the audience, and that was one of my favorite things, was being able to toy with that and have fun with like watching that build, where you can kind of catch an audience off guard, because with 3 minutes, which can be very long, you can play with it. Like you said, you are basically forcing them, like, strap in. Yeah, here we go. We're just taking this journey together.
And it's funny because that's a different element of, and I don't want to call Chris out on this or anyone on this, but it's funny because there's a different element in some of the folks that I think are making trailers are really trying to make an end product and really want that product to be good or funny or whatever. And coming from a more of a performer standpoint, a performer having an opportunity that an audience is basically seatbelted or is basically strapped in, and you have them captive, yes, whether or not, and they can't run away or anything like that. It as a performer, it's gotta be, it would be so much more tempting to be like, screw good, I want to get a particular reaction from these people, or I want to get, or whatever happened, or this kind of thing. And I think that's a very different mindset from what, there's the performers that make trailers, and then there's direct, or filmmakers that make trailers, and sometimes there's a little bit different mindset there.
Well, and that's the beauty of, I would say, film versus live, too, is that live, as an audience member, so if I'm watching a stand-up comedian, less so sketch or theater, but still an expectation that if this is, or a hope, that if this isn't going well, my reaction can influence this potentially to change course. With film, it's already committed. There's literally nothing I can do short of breaking the projection player. To change what's going to happen. And from the control standpoint, that's amazing, because you're in charge. There's nothing, if you're going to be insecure about it, too bad, you're stuck with what you did.
It's a roll of the dice at that point, because who knows what's going to come before or come after. So it's a pretty good rush. So I was going to say, so what happens if let me pick my two hypotheticals here.
Okay.
So hypothetical, let's see, ABC calls you to be on a new sitcom. They're not sure about it. They're just trying it out.
Okay.
And it's about men who work for the government who steal tax money.
Okay.
And go on joyrides.
All right.
So, granted, it doesn't sound awesome, but it's ABC.
You're wrong. That sounds amazing.
Oh,
but
okay, all right. Well, see, it shows what I know.
It shows ABC, way more about my lack of taste.
So ABC calls and offers that, or hypothetically, WWE calls and says, we need a new sideline ring announcer for to appear in both shows.
Yep.
For a long-running contract, a stint, and three, like they say, like 3-4 angles, or 3-4 years, whereas there's a predetermined angle that after the 3 years you will die in some amazing way.
As a character or as a human being?
As a character.
Okay. Just want to make sure.
You never know. Which one do you choose?
Without even hesitating, I choose the WWE angle.
Nice.
Yeah. And that you're catching me at a really good time with that. But the 2013 so far, and I won't get boring or long with this, but I realize I'm 29, just about 30, and we've talked a lot about like comedy or things I've done, but the one thing that's been consistent is not really paid, not really like gotten paid to do it, and not really like super succeeded to a degree that I think people would qualify. Like I've had fun doing it. We talk about, did this person make it or not? I would be on the or not list, and so I really started to get very focused focused about what can I actually devote my energy and time to? And not only that, what am I good at that I could be great at with practice? And doing the ring announcing, I did a show for Cage Sport MMA a few weeks ago, somewhat out of the blue, and big thanks to Harrison Bevins, who's a fighter, former Bellingham guy himself, who recommended it to me. Got to do it, and it just like totally woke me up to how much I actually really love announcing and how much I've really missed it.
And do a quick rundown of what you've announced as far as you did the bells, Yep,
did the bells, did Fight Night Entertainment, and I was also a ring announcer for some West Coast Fight Club. That was a Bellingham gym, mixed martial arts, did some of their shows, and then came down here, and unfortunately just, I didn't really have the opportunities, nor did I seek them out. I should also say in the past, I was also the announcer for the Olympia Pepsi baseball team a few years ago. But then, with this Cage Sport MMA came up, and it just, again, reignited when I kind of sat down, studied, and you made an interesting, you might not have known this, but the episode with Chris Patton, you guys had a discussion in there that was fascinating to me, because there was the debate about the authenticity of me, and it was a quick debate. And I didn't take any offense to it at all, but it was an interesting question, because again, I know the inconsistency can be, I come off as very nice. I want to be very polite to everybody. What is the real angle? Am I really that nice, or am I thinking other things? And what that came across, I started to actually go back and listen and watch myself, was that when it comes to announcing, and like you're supposed to have a certain amount of hype to it, a certain amount of just being really, get a crowd motivated, and it's not about you, it's about getting them pumped. And I was like, wow, that actually fits perfectly for kind of what I present. And I looked back and I watch a lot of like 80s and early 90s WWF, and like Sean Mooney, Gene Okerlund, Howard Finkel, and I was like, gosh, I could never be one of the wrestlers, obviously, but the announcers are so important to me. And I kind of looked at it and went, I could do that. And I listen to sports radio all the time. I'm a big sports fanatic, and I was like, I can't play the sports, but I can support them through that. And I think I have more fun doing that. And that's not to say I don't have fun with the other projects, like an ABC show and hypothetical. Within one day, I would be questioning, am I really the right guy for this? Is it me? Is this, is this the direction I want the show to go? Like, it'd just be so fraught with, is there more, especially since we're talking WWE, is there more maybe mainstream acceptability to that? Right. Yes. But I'm more concerned at this point, like, what am I going to have fun with, and what am I, like, when I put my chips on the table, what do I think I can be better at others at? And when I look at other stand-ups, I'm not better than them. When I look at like filming things, like obviously Patton's a genius. Am I better at filming editing than he is? No. Am I better at him at announcing? Yes. And that's not a knock on him, and that's not to say that it's all competitive, but it's about that self-value and self-worth of what can I contribute to the world that is something I can uniquely be proud of. And so that became a very serious answer, but that's
okay. I want to break it right now just by saying that I want to have Patton, if you're out there, I want to have an announce off.
Son of a gun. That's such a good idea. Oh, man.
An announce off. We'll work something out. Anyway, I totally interrupted you, but
you're fine.
I just wanted to.
This is what Chris was good at editing me.
I wanted to. I guess so. The love of sports obviously is. You've dug into a little bit. You wrote a Bleacher Report article.
Yeah. A couple of those, yeah.
And a couple Bleacher Report articles, and the definitely there's a wit that comes with it that you can still play in kind of all the angles of everything you've learned and everything you've experienced coming to it. But at the same time, it's more kind of a journalistic take on things, and more kind of a direct take on things. And is that generally that's funner for you, and that's kind of more not funner, but is that more something you want to get definitely more into? And
and between that and starting hopefully a new podcast here soon. We got the title. It's going to be called Sports Happy with Kenny Davis.
Okay.
And part of that is, I'm happy just because I want it to be a positive show, because that's who I am. Like, that's what I do.
And first again, episode talking about Caleb Moore at the Winter Games. Today on Sports Happy.
That's awesome. Well, but it kind of, again, it dawned on me was, we all know the cliche of like the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results. Mm-hmm. And I think it got to a point, and I knew this right before I walked away from stand-up. Two things stood out to me. One, everyone else talked about, what's your favorite stand-up special? Oh, I want to go watch some live stand-up. Mm-hmm. And that was the last thing in the world I wanted to do. Like if there was anything else on Netflix, if there was anything else to go do in the town that night, I would do it.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I clearly don't love this.
Yeah.
And the other part of that was just, was I doing stand-up because someone, a few very nice friends of mine were very supportive, and you're so great, Davis. And, whether or not I believe them, obviously I lean towards the no. But was I doing it to fulfill, compliments from somebody else, or was I doing it because it was fulfilling me? Mm-hmm. And so part of the, you bring it up, like I love sports, and I actually think I'm, could be really good at this because I listen, like I actively seek out these sports shows, be it, the Talking Heads or whatever. I loved writing the Bleacher Report articles. The only thing that stopped me there was I just completely nosedived on WWE interest, and those are the articles I was reading or writing. So I was like, oh, that's not good. I've kind of gotten that back now.
Right.
And then, also with the announcing, like it kind of reignited that, maybe through the 20s, I still love comedy. I've got a new sketch group I'm working with, but I'm more on the writer side than trying to perform. I like that more, and I think it's just a better use of my talents. Mm-hmm. Being behind the camera, feeding others to be as good as they can be. Mm-hmm. And then the sports angle was I really haven't explored it to a huge degree. I've done some stuff here and there, but that's something that clearly I'm passionate about, and maybe that's been the key all along, is find something I'm very passionate about mm-hmm. and willing to fully explore versus I kind of like this and I got some compliments about it. Let's just go see what happens.
Right.
Very, very. I've learned that there's a very big difference between those two of like how the effort you're willing to put in, or at least I'm willing to.
Right. And to go back to something we talked about earlier, it's a different grind. It's definitely a different.
Absolutely.
Grind. Yeah.
And it feels like less of a grind.
Yeah. And I mean, I and even just thinking about it, to study, or would you want to look at a bunch of newspapers or a bunch of stand-ups or a bunch of whatever and say, okay, I'm watching these things and I'm reading these things, having to come up with something funny, and versus watching the Mariners season and seeing that's funny in and of itself and just doesn't need anything at all.
Well, and that's the thing that I think, there was Sports Show with Norm Macdonald on Comedy Central, but that was just flat out like Weekend Update with sports. Right. But I've rarely seen, oh man, Chris Patton's going to hate me for this, outside of someone like Bill Simmons, who I know he can't stand. But he's someone who I think, for the most part, does a decent job of mixing sports and comedy without being too far one or the other. Like, he's someone someone who doesn't watch sports could still get into his writing.
I see.
And that's some more in the mold, not necessarily being Bill Simmons. Obviously, that guy's like mega huge. I would never put myself in his category. But the idea of it's something I personally haven't seen lots of, where it's a sports show or it's a comedy show about sports. But what about something in the middle where it's a sports that's allowed to have a sense of humor and positivity? And that's something where the original podcast idea, I referenced the title before, is going to be Sorry for the Apologies, because I apologize a lot and people get on my case for it. And I was like, oh, that's a great title. But then since it was supposed to be a political show, I struggled with just how really negative politics is. Mm-hmm. Like, it's very tough, and all I was doing was just writing stuff, just mocking people, tearing them apart.
Right.
And I started to struggle, and this is where my struggle continues, is this a joke I'm willing to say to somebody's face if they're here right now? Because I could have the funniest, he's an easy target, but Mitt Romney joke. But if he's in my living room right now as a human being, would I have the courage to say that to his face, knowing that, and it sounds so silly, but this could hurt this guy's feelings? And I struggled with that, where it's, of course he's not going to hear it, but I want to be to a point where I'm comfortable enough that if someone heard me, they're okay with what I'm saying.
Right.
Even if it's criticism, but not just, here's another shot, here's another joke, because it was killing me.
You're more self-aware than some. I'm less self-aware. I think there are some people out there like me that are a little more if Mitt Romney was here, then I'd be like, Mitt, you think this was funny. So, and then go into a whole spiel.
I would hope you'd be right. And it turns out he's like, yes, more Mitt jokes.
Oh, he wouldn't, but
I know.
I learn those lessons as they come, you see. I don't learn the lessons, but that's okay. So I asked this of everybody who's on the show.
Yeah.
First, we're going to talk about what do you miss about Bellingham? Only because you are not in Bellingham anymore.
Yes.
You traitorous bastard. No. It's kind of funny. As I started the show, I realized I've got like 3 shows or something like that, or 2 shows of people that aren't even here. That's so cold. Yes. That's so cold. That's okay.
No, it speaks to Nathan's Bellingham State of Mind song, where that was so popular, was people who, not only in Bellingham, but so many of them were out of Bellingham, reminding them, wow, I love Bellingham.
Exactly.
And I think that's why I'm such a big fan of your show. This show is that it again reignited for me of like, that's a really great town. And I know when I left, I didn't feel that way because I just was so raring to experience something different that I overlooked. And I'll segue this to what I miss is what's so great about that town, and I couldn't really see it at the end when I was actually there, was it's got this really perfect mix, and I mean that, having been to a couple places now, a really perfect mix of entertainment. There's stuff to do. There's really cool people in that town without being an overwhelming like metropolitan city. So you get a lot of the same benefits: great restaurants, great culture, great entertainment, but you don't get that overwhelming like everything's so big and packed and congested and all of that. It's a really cool town, and I think it's
I like to call it a yuppie Portland, but hick Seattle.
Oh, I like that.
Hick Seattle, but yuppie Portland.
That's actually a really good analogy.
Somewhere in the middle.
So I definitely miss that about it, the people, and a lot of its memories, like it's where I met my wife. So obviously it will always hold a special place for me. On the spiritual level, like, the churches, Cornwall, CTK, I really grew and met great people through there. And that was on, my spiritual walk, through the Upfront Theater, through doing Backflip Wilson there, Dead Parrots, like all of there's so many great like memory spots there that you just drive by and it's just a flood of where this great creativity was not only for myself personally created, but when I watch what people are up to now and just how it just so exploding, like again, you're doing a Whatcom Inquisitor podcast. Awesome. There's Trailer Wars. Awesome. Dead Parrots is just going insane and getting bigger every year, it seems. Awesome. And I really like seeing, and even stand up. I really like seeing the town on the artistic side, because that's typically where I've ventured, grow every year. And I miss being part of that or contributing to that as directly as I did when I was there.
I keep thinking about the Upfront's a good example, because I keep thinking, assuming it stays around and if Ryan holds on to it, or if he moves it to somebody else or whatever, but it's going to be one of those things that if it does stick around, it's going to be interesting to see who comes in, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, after it's been this like established place for so long in Bellingham, versus all of us, it's still kind of this new thing. In a way, it's still kind of a new thing, but it's going to be neat to see the people that come in that are trying to break into the Upfront in Bellingham in some way in like 10 years,
You can keep this for posterity and call me out on if I'm wrong. I would wager, based on what it just seems the Bellingham way is, like when I left Dead Parrot Society, I think we had a really special cast, and I left thinking there's no way this cast can be topped. And then like every cast thereafter, especially like it started when Chris Erickson led it, continued on through, Amalia Larson, Allison Lures, like it just kept getting bigger and better. KBIK, same thing. Trailer Wars, no one's really left, but it keeps getting bigger. I would wager that if Ryan Stiles leaves and it goes somebody else, and I think the perception would be, well, the Upfront's dead in the water. Like it was the Ryan place, that just the way it happens, someone insanely creative will come and somehow it just gets bigger. It just seems to be what happens in that town.
Galen or somebody, Galen Emanuel take it or something, and I can see that place lasting a really long time if it just sticks to its kind of creative roots. So I want to ask the next question is, what do you not miss about Bellingham?
What I don't miss, and it's more of just on and it's almost unfair to say, because I think with technology this isn't a limit. But again, when I left there, I was feeling very stifled in just as far as the opportunities, and it was specifically around the stand-up art form. But I love the feel of it. I just even said it's got all the great benefits of a Seattle without, a lot of the drawbacks. But part of that is, realistically, it is, a fairly, not small, it is a fairly small town. The surrounding communities, it's kind of its own little world. And I don't miss that feeling of feeling like I was not necessarily trapped, but just where are the further opportunities? Again, not totally fair because podcast, anyone in the world could hear this. Trailer Wars, uploaded to YouTube, anyone can see it. But that's the thing I would just say is sometimes I definitely walked away feeling a little small towny from it. And at the time it was a complaint. And now it's just, I really like it down here. But I miss that far more, like the town itself, but that feeling of, and I'm sure, I think it's part of being a college town is that there is that consistent cycle of a large portion of the population where it's just you go on. But I think like yourself, and again, this is where Nathan's song hit as well, can hit that. Great things can still be done there. It's just a matter of when you find your role or your place there.
Okay. All right, this is going to be the last question, and it is I'm gonna start asking. I think this is going to be a continued question on Whatcom Inquisitor. Give me a great either day out or night out in Bellingham. So it's got to have some, key features, maybe like somewhere to eat or yada yada. So give me a night out right now. You want to take your wife out on a date or whatever. Just make up a night out or a day out in Bellingham. What do you do? Your last day in Bellingham, what do you do?
Okay. I'm going to go from night forward because that was always my favorite parts of Bellingham were the night. So I'm going to go, this is so hypocritical because I haven't been there yet. From what I understand, your new theater up there, the movie theater, is incredible.
Haven't been
so I'm going to the movie theater, but then as soon as the movie's done, going to the upfront. No matter what you do, you're going to have great entertainment. And then here's the key. You got to go to the late show at the upfront because then that puts you in the prime eating hour for my two absolute favorite places there. You go to a pita pit, have a nice little pita. You do some turkey, you do some bacon, you do a little salt and pepper. It's amazing. Do some ranch. But then this is how I got the belly that I have now. Then you're not done. Oh, no. You go from Pita Pit to El Capitan's hot dogs.
Of course.
And they're open late at night. Grab a couple of those. Again, belly. And you throw the onions, the spicy brown mustard, the ketchup. You down those. You go back. You find some friends. You have a nice little... I've always loved, again, that I think it's part of just the youthful college atmosphere there, and you just have that night, in Bellingham, have a few adult beverages. But that would always be the perfect. You got to find something where you can be in that area to go do a Pita Pit El Capitan's combo. That's the key. Everything else is just extra.
All right. Excellent night. So, all right. Well, where can people find you right now?
Right now, you can go to youtube.com/castingthenews for a weekly show I do with Dan Erickson and Chris Patton. And I will also, you'll soon see Now with Dames. Hopefully that'll be on youtube.com now with Dames for a new sketch comedy group. Okay. And other new projects on the way, but I don't have anything, sports happy, but figuring out the web addresses. So for right now, right this second, you want Casting the News and Now with Dames.
Perfect.
Cool.
All right, and I want to, as Taylor from the Whatcom Inquisitor right now, I want to thank everyone for watching, and I want to thank my guest, Kenny Davis. And, thanks a lot, Kenny.
All right, thank you, Taylor.
Yep, have a good one.
You too.